My focus and contemplation this week was on blame, as I realize it is easier to blame than to take accountability for our actions. Have you ever asked yourself, why do other people blame you? Or why do you blame others? And I realize that many times we blame because we are unable to see how we can do it differently. But many times people was also not willing to see how they could do it differently. Therefore, they get attached to blame. Many times people is not willing for different insight or different perspective. Therefore, they hold rather onto blame. Because blame gives also a sense of power. Another way I think the reason why people hold onto blame, people blame when they experience guilt. Because people do not know what to do with guilt and how to shift guilt. Therefore, they blame. Because blame is a wonderful tool to defend ourselves. And instead of dealing with guilt, they shift the responsibility to the other person by using blame. So instead of taking responsibility, they use blame to shift the responsibility to the other person. I also think people blame as it gives them a false sense of control. It makes them feel in that moment, I have the control. I am right and you are wrong. So where there's blame, there's judgment. And many times it gives really a true sense or fake sense of control. Because in fact, what blame does, it never actually addresses the real problem. So in fact, in the long run, you actually lose control. So when we do not, what blame does, it usually brings a lot of resentment and a lot of regret inside the relationship. Because it's just blame. And they do not actually resolve anything. They do not actually handle conflict effectively. So blame gets used as a tool whereby people mismanage conflict, and it creates a lot of resentment and a lot of regret, especially in the long run. Therefore, blame is not an option because it does not give control. People is holding on to control, but it does not give control. So yes, blame is a tool people use to defend themselves. Blame is a great defending. But in the long run, we lose control instead of gaining control. I also think that people tend to blame as they have a desire to be perfect. And people will even blame themselves for this due to this desire to be perfect. And if I blame, it still means I'm still good enough. It means I'm not a failure. So many times people blame for the desire to be perfect. So in fact, what I think blame basically says is, I refuse to take responsibility for my contribution to the problem. Blame basically says, I do not want to take responsibility for the part I play in this. The second thing I think blame basically says, it says, my desire for this behavior is bigger than a desire to change. It basically says, I do not want to change. I want to keep holding on to this behavior. This behavior is bigger than the desire to change. So to shift blame, we need to ask and we need to do some introspection to realize the impact of our behavior on others and how our behavior actually influences others and other people's reality. Therefore, to shift blame, we need to shift our perspectives and we need to shift how we look at a certain situation. And instead of looking at it through our own eyes, for a moment, we need to have the willingness to look at the situation from another person's perspective. And that brings insight, that brings compassion, and that brings a deep sense of understanding. To shift blame, we also realize that we all make mistakes. And to make a mistake doesn't mean I'm a failure. But making a mistake delivers the opportunity to do something differently. It delivers the opportunity for self-improvement. So every time I make a mistake, I can choose to hold on to blame, or I can choose an opportunity of self-improvement. But we cannot improve if we're not willing to change. But every time we change, we evolve and we grow. To take responsibility, we need to look, what is my part in this? How does my behavior influence other people? And in fact, the more you're willing to change and the more you're willing to understand the part you play, the greater control you have in your life. I do not necessarily like the word control because I do not believe we can actually control anything. But I would say the more we are actually in charge of our own lives. So blame can be sneaky. It's an energy I think we need to realize. We need to become aware of the energy of blame so we can take more accountability and responsibility for our own actions. Thank you for listening.